Hey, Peggy. Hey, Ruth.
Hi, Tracy. And everyone.
Nice. Good evening, everyone. We're almost ready. We're getting ready. Um, while we're waiting just a little bit longer, I'm Tracy Wilson Cleecamp, president of Race Matters Friends, and there's Chad McLaurin in the corner over there. He does everything I cannot do and then more. Um, our meetings used to be bi-monthly on Wednesdays, and we've moved them to Sunday evenings, hoping that allows us to capture more attendees. And our meetings are archived on our Race Matters Friends. Tracy Wilson Cleecamp, president of Race Matters Friends, and there's Chad McLaurin in the corner over there. Is that you, Chad, that's got your phone on, or something else going in the background?
Why are you blaming me? But yeah, that was me.
So we do Sundays, and so this month we're meeting on the 7th and the 21st, and we've invited Lieutenant Mike Hester to come to our next meeting and talk about police training and curriculum. I don't know if he's responded in the affirmative, but we have extended an invitation to him. Tonight we are going to be listening to some of the work for the RMF Bail Fund team, and that's Gene Hill, and they're a really tough group. This team has been working very diligently, collecting information and collecting data with available public resources. And I believe in my conversations with Susan Mays, they've also had to make public records requests. One of the things that I have learned as an activist is that understanding data is super important. And most of you know I'm a doctoral student and I'm taking my first quantitative research class. I tried to teach myself with a friend some statistics over the winter break, but understanding the data that public institutions put out there for us to consume is a huge challenge. And if we don't understand their data or how to make sense of it, we kind of get pulled into their web of, I would say, silly stuff and nonsense. So it's really helpful when we have people on our volunteer teams that know how to untangle data. So for me, this is very exciting to have an activist team with people who are willing to give their skills of analyzing data and pulling data together and teaching us how they do that. So Jean Mahal is going to do that. I thought we might start with her giving us a little bit of background about herself and how she kind of got interested in working in the bail fund. We also have Peggy Placer, who's sort of the team coordinator, and Susan Mays, who's also involved with this coordinating data. And I think Peggy Bryan and Jeff Bryan involved, so they may jump in as well and give additional information. And please use the chat function of if you're able to, or post online. We'll try to make sure that we get to your questions as we're going along. Okay, Jean, take it away.
Okay, cool.
You got lured into this.
I hope you can hear me. If you can't, somebody say something. Also, I like to work where people ask me questions when they have them rather than saving them. So I'm Jean, and I have been retired from the University of Missouri for about a year now. I spent 30 years there teaching and doing research, and part of my research was, in biological sciences. And I analyzed quantitative data. And so that was kind of a natural fit. I became interested in this work. I came to it sort of, I don't know, in a roundabout way. I was incredibly dismayed by the university's response to the killing in Ferguson, Missouri, and to the way our MU students and their concerns were treated, which I thought was really dismissive. I found that deeply troubling. I also was very affected by a number of well-publicized shootings, one of a faculty member in Alabama who happened to be a close family friend. I have a younger daughter who took a college African-American Studies course, and she was kind enough to share the entire reading list, all the books, all the articles. And so I read all of those to try and understand a little bit about a whole lot of issues that I don't know much about. And as I approached retirement, I decided to make a clean break with what I had done before, in the sense that I don't go back to campus, I don't teach, I don't do research. I still have the skills, but I just don't do that anymore. And I wanted to become involved in the community. And I first became involved in gun violence prevention by working with Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense. I still work with them. I do a lot of legislative work for them and legislative advocacy. Last summer, I became involved in a number of the Black Lives Matter protests, and the bail fund. I have been a member of Race Matters Friends without doing anything for well over a year. And I saw a post about the bail fund, and I thought, that's interesting. And so I went to the training, and I can't describe it any other way than I was absolutely appalled when I began to understand what the bail system, cash bail system is, and what pre-trial incarceration is. And I thought, this is insanity. And so I got my feet wet and started doing some of the bailouts. And Susan Mays brought up the need to understand who is being held and on what charges and why, who's targeted. And I thought, oh, data, I know how to do data. And so that's kind of how I got here. I don't know, I don't want to spend more time on me because that's not really very useful or interesting, I don't think. I'd love to talk about the presentation, if you guys want to share that screen so people can see it.
Okay.
Ooh, cool. Yeah. Is there a way to make it full screen?
Yeah, I just have all these little tabs are starting to pop up in front of my controls. Let me
Sorry.
just a second. Having to resize on my windows, can't get to my menus. Review.
That's okay. Kind of just work with that. It's all right.
Okay, yeah, if that works then.
Cool, that'll work. Okay, so we can go to the next one because I already told you who I am. And so what happened when I started getting involved in data analysis is Susan told me that there were two sources of data that we could look at about who is in jail and why. And the first one, so I've listed them both on this slide, and on the left-hand side, you see something called the 7 a.m. report, which is listed and set at 7 a.m. each morning by the jail. And it reports the people who were booked into the jail in the previous 24 hours. And so other members of the data team, not me, went out and captured those data every day from July 28th of 2020 through the end of 2020. And I took those data, and they have all sorts of information, and I'll kind of go into that in a little bit, something, their person's name, their birthday, their address, their age, and then the charges that they're booked with, how much bond is associated with each charge, who arrested them, what agency, and a few other things like that. And from that information, I had over 3,000 different charges to look at. And there were 1,713 what I call person bookings. So some people within that brief time span were arrested more than once, about 200 of them were. So those data represent about 1,300 unique individuals and 1,700 person arrest records, if that makes sense. So that's one set of data. And somebody might be only in for a day and appear in that just one day and not be there the next day. The second set of data you can get by going to the Boone County Jail site under current detainees, and it lists everybody who's currently in the jail. And so if people are held a long time, then they appear day after day after day. And so I took 17 daily downloads of those data from July 27th through January 20th of this year. And that represents just under 2,000 charges and nearly 680 people. Okay, so that's the pool of data I had to work with. There are other sorts of data. You guys have already heard about the traffic stop data. That's a different set of information. And then Tracy mentioned briefly some additional data that Susan would be better able to describe than I will, that we're requesting from a Freedom of Information Act request. And I have not seen those or done anything with them. So I just want to talk about these two pools of data. Does anybody want to say anything right now or ask a question before I keep moving?
No,
Okay, the next
I
one.
did want to comment on one thing. I really love the fact that what we're looking at here is you're looking at the total number of bookings, as you mentioned, but we're also reducing those to unique incidents. So like you have one individual, one incident might generate 3 or 4 charges. And it's the same problem that we're facing with like Columbia Public Schools with their kind of disciplinary data. Or any level of government where they're not willing to like, I guess their idea of redaction is omission. It's not managing for, what could be publicly released. So I think it's fantastic that you're doing this. I'm just kind of curious, has there been any discussion with the Boone County Jail about updating their dashboard or what they provide publicly?
I've never spoken to them at all. I've just taken the data and actually, if we look at the next slide, I spent a lot of time trying to figure out the charges because there's 14 different arresting agencies. Columbia Police Department is obviously one of the ones that uses the jail the most, and the Boone County Sheriff's Department. But they don't all use the same abbreviations. They don't all use the same shorthand in the way they describe charges. And so I want to talk a little bit about kind of how we focused on the data to try and make sense of it. And the first was to try and understand the charges. And so Susan and a couple others of us on the data team had a couple of Zoom meetings where I had gone through and tried to come up with some categories. And then we talked about the categories of charges. And then we talked about exceptions and how we find out what they mean. And it took a bit of work to figure out what the abbreviations were. It took some reading of CaseNet, which is a publicly available database that allows you to see who is being charged with, who is currently in the court system. And so you can try to understand what charges are there. And then I did essentially looking up Missouri statutes by number and reading them to try and understand what kinds of charges there were. So going back to that slide I just had, we divided charges as an agreement in the group into 5 groups. And this is what made sense to us. We had what we call drug and drug-related charges, and those are that included driving while intoxicated. It included possession of controlled substances. It included selling of drugs. It included manufacturing of drugs. It included drug paraphernalia. So that was drugs. Property is a very diverse category of charges. It includes things like tampering with a vehicle. It includes trespassing. It includes theft, stealing property. It includes forgery. And so there are a lot of things like that in property, and I have a much longer list. Rules and procedures charges were things that we considered to be often minor, not always, but things like not having a seatbelt on, driving while your license is revoked or suspended, not having proof of insurance, not wearing a helmet, resisting arrest. We called it rules and procedures. And there are others, and I can go through more examples. And some of them were ridiculously petty. There's 2 people who were in jail for not having a valid fishing license, which I thought was just absurd. Traffic was included actual moving violations like speeding, an illegal lane change, careless driving, that kind of thing. And then violent charges, again, was fairly diverse. It included things as serious as murder. It included domestic violence. It included kidnapping. It included armed criminal action, assault, those sorts of things. And so all of those charges in each data set were divided into, were placed in one of these categories. And so people might have only a single charge, or they might have multiple charges. And if they had multiple charges, they might be all of one type, or they might be several types. Okay, what else? And then we looked at features like, I wanted to look at race. And in the 7 a.m. report, that was not possible, or that was not possible because race is not listed. It's only listed in the current detainees data. But the address was listed, and I will come back to that. I'm going to circle back to that in a minute. I did analyses using the charges, as I said. I did analyses using something called an FTA warrant, which is failure to appear. So if someone has a court date and they just don't show up, then a judge can issue a failure to appear warrant, and they can be arrested on that warrant for not having shown up to court. I looked at arresting agency. I looked at the 2 populations of people, the 7 a.m. report people and the current detainees people. And there is some overlap, but not a huge amount. Okay. For people who are data wonks, I subjected all the conclusions that I'm going to talk about to statistical analysis. And I used 2 kinds of statistics, chi-square and t-test. Where possible, I used them as they were pre-programmed in Excel spreadsheets. Where they weren't, I just used Excel functions to build the tests myself, just programmed them. And I'm not going to bother anybody with that. What I'd like to do is move on to the next one and actually look at that one. Okay. So as I said, the 7 a.m. data has address but not race. And so I pulled out those people who reported a Columbia address, and I divided them into zip code. 65202 is north of the freeway, 65201 is the east part of town, and 65203 is the west part of town. And color coded in each of these bars is one of the zip codes, and the little bar on the right is homeless people, unsheltered people. If you look, and then I used US Census data to figure out that 65202, zip code 65202 north of the freeway, is 1/3 of Columbia residents. But if you look at the size of the bar, it's nearly half of all charges. And that means that charges are overrepresented in zip code 65202. And so that immediately asks the question, well, why? What is it about that zip code? Well, using the census data, Zip code 65202 is 14.7% Black, whereas the other zip codes are less than 10% Black. And so that suggests both a geographical bias and a racial bias in the assignment of charges to people, in the booking of people. Questions on that before I move on? Comments? Yes, no. Okay. So I want to compare those data with a similar analysis where I looked at current detainees. For current detainees, we do have race listed, but we don't have address listed. And I will say, I think it's frustrating that you don't have consistent data in the two data sets, because that would make it a much stronger, it would be much more clear what's going on. So if you look at this current detainees graph, there's 3 bars. The bar on the left shows the distribution of population, with Black being the kind of orangey color on the bottom, other, meaning Asian and anyone else who isn't Black or white, being the kind of bright orange in the middle, and the tan bar on top being white. So overall in the city, white people are 80.4% of the population, according to the US Census. If you look at the distribution of charges, which is the right-hand bar, 45.6% of the current detainees and 45.6% of the charges are associated with Black people. 50.9% are associated with white people. But Black people make up only 10%, 10.7% of the population, according to the census. So Black people are clearly overrepresented. I was startled that it was this stark. Okay. Then if we look at the next one, that one, okay. So in this one, I wanted to look at the different charge groups, those 5 groups I mentioned: drugs, property, rules, traffic, and violent. And that's the way those 5 bars sit on that graph. So within the current detainee population, about 45% are Black, 50% are white. And if you look at the proportion, they should be equally divided if those charge types are equally levied against both groups. White people had statistically more property charges, and Black people had statistically more violent charges. And you can see that because the 2 colors in the bar aren't split 50-50, if that makes sense. If anyone wants to ask a question, please do.
I wrote in the chat that I wanted to come back and talk about undocumented persons later at the end. I don't think we
Okay.
We can talk about that later.
Okay, and so then the next one, this looks again at the charge type. So going from the left to the right: drug charges, property charges, rules charges, traffic charges, and violent charges. And this is for the whole set of 7 a.m. Data. And then, oh dear, this is, just lost my screen. The bottom part, the dark part of each bar, is where the charge did not have a failure to appear warrant with it. And the lighter orange part of the bar is where the charge did have a failure to appear warrant with it. Okay, and as I said, a failure to appear warrant is issued by a judge when somebody doesn't show up for court. And it was interesting to me that the rules and procedures charges most often had failure to appear warrants, more often than any other charge type. And I'm not there doing the arresting. I'm not there in the courtroom, but I saw over and over and over failure to appear warrants, very often associated with what I would consider really petty things, like not having your insurance, proof of insurance when you're driving, driving with a suspended license, that kind of thing. And to me, that seems like harassment. I was really struck by that.
Well, I can tell you, Jean, and that my son got pulled over once, and it was because he had a warrant for expired tags, and it took several police officers to show up, and they took him to jail. And I'm like, it's a traffic, it's not serious, right? But the police officer's response was, it's against the law, and we're here to enforce the law. And it seems to me that they have a lot of discretion to not make those kinds of moves, right? That have nothing to do with violence and have everything to do with people's ability to pay. So,
Absolutely.
May I say something in regards to that? This is Erica Buford. I'm with People's Defense, and Tracy had invited me. I had wanted to, what you were saying in regards to that. My son, when he was younger, I think every cop, I had an expedition, and I believe every cop on the force probably stopped him for having too many people, because he was 16 to 18. And I believe he had, one of the things is they stopped him for the license plate light out. They stopped him because he had too many people in the car. And he knew that he was, the insurance card was taped to the top of the dash. So he had no reason they had no reason to go in the glove box. He got to the point where he would take his phone and record around the whole car before he got in the car. And so I finally talked to the chief. I wasn't going through anyone else. And I said, this has got to stop. There is no reason all your cops have basically stopped him. He has no more than 3 people in the car, because I didn't even want him to have 2 people in that back. And expeditions have, those 2 rows of seats. So he knew he wasn't to have anybody in the far back. They stopped him for no seat belts, but we lived in Texas, and compared to the $10, $20 ticket for a seatbelt here, it was $350 there. And now they could stop you if they seen you not having a seatbelt on. So these are things that he learned from living in Texas. But I'm just, he got to the point where he had a felony because they finally took away his license, but he still had to go take his kids to school. He had to go go to work. So in trying to get his license back for the hardship thing, it got to the point where he couldn't even do that. But every time that they would stop him, so he rarely comes to Columbia now. But every time that they would stop him, it got to the point where it was a felony. It wasn't even a misdemeanor. It could have been a misdemeanor when they stopped him, but since he had been stopped so many times, it turned into a felony. So I just wanted to say that.
I wanted to read Peggy's. I'm trying not to react to that, Erica, because I hear those kind of stories so often. And we are always told when we explain those stories that we made it up, or it's our imagination, or it didn't happen, and all that other kind of stuff. But it starts getting me upset. But anyway, Peggy says, one of our next projects is to challenge the number of FTA warrants, especially the ones that land people in jail. And yes, I think looking at that chart and is pretty shocking. That's pretty shocking.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is.
Thank you.
So, can I ask a question? Since you were only given like 5 or so minutes to do your presentation, are you going to? I know you can only go back every other month or something to the council. Are you going to have someone else go? Continue where you left off. And to get through to get through it. I would show my face. I have like a hair bag on, and I have face cleaner on my face. So that's why I wasn't.
So I wonder if there's a way that Jean, that you could do a work session. You know, the work sessions are always at the discretion of the council people to hear what they want to hear. So maybe it's possible that Pat Fowler or Ian Thomas can make it so that we can have you can present your data for a pre-council work session.
I was going to go to the Citizens Police Review Board. Is that the right name? Next week, I was going to go.
You only have 5 minutes there.
I wasn't going to say anything, just to understand what it is. I'll circle back to that whole issue later.
Okay.
I know Pat a little bit. I've known Ian for years, and I know Brian. And I was going to actually contact each of them and say, hey, 5-minute increments just aren't going to get us anywhere. Is there some other vehicle for having a discussion about this? And I'd love to come back to that issue. Yeah, when I've worked through this.
Okay.
But yeah,
not only that,
5 minutes were.
oh, sorry. Not only that, but we need to get to the county. We need to get to the sheriff's department and the commission and the judges, because every one of these data points result from decisions made by law enforcement and then decisions made by the prosecutor and the judges. So these are, you know, socially constructed, and we have to get to the people that do that. And there are a lot of them.
Absolutely. So does your team still go to those monthly meetings, Peggy? So are you able to present this data at one of those meetings with Mary Epping setting you guys up to present?
We are on the agenda for the next one,
And
on
when
February 23rd. It's on Zoom. So it's not that we're going to have loads of time in that one either, because the judges get antsy about getting to court, but we are going to do a handout for them, and Jean's gotten the ball rolling on all that.
What is that meeting called again?
We call it CJAC. It's Criminal Justice Administration Coordination Committee. So CJACC.
Criminal Justice
Administration Coordination Committee.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. And it meets once a month, right? Peggy, it meets once a month?
Yes,
Okay.
once a month. Once in a while, they even cancel that one.
Oh,
But usually on a Tuesday at 7:45 a.m.
okay. Great. Sorry about that, Jean.
Yeah, let's get back to Jean.
No problem. No, I'm learning, which is, yeah, I'm going to get back to that. I want to go to the next one, which is gender and FTA warrants. That's it. Okay, this again is the 7 a.m. data, and it bothers me. Men are 3 times more likely to be booked than women. And I think when people look at that, they go, well, yeah, but I want to know why. Why is that? Why is there an assumption that somehow men are more likely to be criminal or more likely to have committed an offense? It seems to me like there's an assumption that needs to be addressed there. But I also looked at gender and the association with failure to appear warrants. And the expectation would be that it would be the same proportion of men and women. And it's not. Nearly half of women have a failure to appear warrant, whereas only about a little over a third of men do. So that suggests some gendered targeting of those warrants. And I think that that ought to be explored and justified. If we go to the next one, I looked at the arresting agencies. There are 14 different arresting agencies that had people booked into the Boone County Jail during the period that I was looking at it. Some of them, there were just like a few people. So I divided out the most common BCJ, which I assume means Boone County Jail.
Yes.
BCSD, which I assume means Boone County Sheriff's Department, and I don't know how those two designations are different. Then Columbia Police Department has the most people, and everybody else is the little bar on the right. Columbia Police Department have failure to appear warrants less frequently than does Boone County Jail or Boone County Sheriff's Department. And I'm not quite sure what to make of that, other than it is a statistically significant difference. And however that might fit into a narrative, it's at least worth noting. And then I want to go down to the next one, which is looking at the same, at the arresting agencies. And in this case, those four groups are stacked in each bar. And I've got the 5 kinds of charges: drug on the left, then property, then rules, then traffic, and then violent, to try and ask which arresting agency is more associated with which kind of charge. CPD had fewer rules and procedures charges proportionally and more violent charges proportionally than the other two major agencies. And again, I'm not quite sure what to do with that, other than I think it's worth noting. Okay, I wanted to make 2 comparisons. So the next one is the first of 2 comparisons, looking at the 2 sets of data, the 7 a.m. data, which are the people who have just been booked in the last 24 hours, versus the current detainees, some of whom were present throughout the entire several-month data set that I've got. So they've been there quite a while. And these 2 bars are the types of charges. The left-hand side is the current detainees. The right-hand side is the 7 a.m. report. The 7 a.m. population has more drug charges than the current detainees, and the current detainees have more violent charges. And that's the green bar, green part on the top of the stack colors. So there are some real differences in the distribution of charge types in those 2 pools of people. And then the real difference that I was startled again, that was so stark, if you look at the last data slide, which is the next one. Okay, for the current detainees, I looked at the bond assigned. Some people have a bond of 0. And that can mean any one of a number of things. So I excluded those people where a dollar amount was set. The average, this is for the current detainees, the average Black detainee had a total bond of $83,000. And the average white detainee had an average total bond of $44,000. And to me, again, this is just stunning, the disparity.
It seems to me that correlates with the leniency of not ticketing or stopping white drivers in the same way. It seems to me that those things go together. It would be interesting to see.
Well, and what I can say in regards to that, having excuse me, I have 4 kids, and one of them has primarily white friends. Now she would prefer to get in the car with her white friends, and They didn't even really live on the south side of town. They lived like out in the country, but they went to Hickman. So, and when I'm saying like out in the country, it's like around that Ballinger. There's a bunch of houses out that way. So those were some of her friends. And then my other daughter, she's a mixture of white and black. But my youngest daughter, she just learned to drive and she's 24 last year. And she's graduated from college and everything. But my middle daughter, she would prefer to be hang with her white friends and let them drive because she didn't want to take the chance of getting stopped. It was easier for them to get out of a ticket than her. Even for speeding, and she went over 3 miles one time out on the south side of town, and she got stopped compared to her white friends that may go 10 miles over, and the cop sees where their address is, and he would either he first he flashes the lights on them, or he'll just go around them once he checks the license plate. And the only reason why we know this is because the chief told me this. Not Chief Jones. It was like 2 chiefs before him. No, 1 before him. I can't think of his name now. I have it written down. But then my youngest daughter, she just was so paranoid of driving because of things that had happened to her brother and just some of her other friends that she just did not want to drive. Just did not.
I think one thing the data is not able to capture is the traumatic effect of engagement with police and police stops, and also the domino effect. I've been reading a lot of different articles. I sent you some, Jean, about how young people's perceptions of the police based on the kind of stop that they have and how the police officers engage with them and talk to them. And there's vicarious stops and direct stops and things like that. But I think that there's a lot of trauma that from being engaged with police officers who will give you a ticket for going to 3 miles over, and other people can get away with things. I mean, my husband's white and we've been pulled over by the police, and I've seen him talk fairly stern to police officers and they don't do anything to him. I mean, he can be himself, Anyway, I wanted to go, Ruth Farr asked a question: who comprises the 14 arresting agencies? And Peggy said arresting agencies include the county sheriff, CPD, Ashland, Centralia. I would be interested if you also had a chart somewhere that kind of shows who's doing the most, what do you call it, of the 14 agencies, has the highest, charges. I guess you do have a slide, but CPD doesn't have the highest charges for failure to appear. You have another one, I think.
Yeah, there's, okay, let me look. Total, hold on a second. There are 14 agencies, and all the 7 a.m. report does is give you an abbreviation, an acronym. And I don't know, I mean, I assume STUR is Sturgeon. I assume UMPD is University of Missouri Police Department. But there's like HPD, MASH, MCEN. I have no idea who those are. Now, there aren't very many charges that they levy. Like, there are 3,300 charges. 1,500 of those are from CPD, and the 2 that are Boone County Jail and Boone County Sheriff's Department together are 1,386. So that's the lion's share of which agencies are levying the most charges. And then I guess the next one in frequency would be University of Missouri Police Department.
Yeah.
I don't think there's enough agencies to be able to say, oh, this, like Hallsville does something or Ashland does something. There's just not.
Right. But you raise an interesting point in terms of just lay people who want to get online and look at the data. I know even when I tried to look at the stop data that was online, I saw that it didn't have race associated with it, that didn't make any sense. Not having the data set up so that you know what those abbreviations, stand for. So there's a lot of work that you had to do just to have I think a very, I don't want to say simple, but I guess that's true, just to have a fundamental understanding of how they operate. And it's so interesting is when we try to have these conversations with them, they get upset because we don't know all this stuff. But it's like, well, you aren't doing your job to make sure that the public can really understand and access what you're doing, which would make it so much easier for us. But part of me thinks they really don't want us to know. And they'll say, well, they do it this way and they do it this way. So since they're all not doing it, we might as well all just not do it together, And it's unfortunate.
Race part makes me really frustrated because these two sets of data that I'm talking about tonight are both Boone County Jail data. You've got race in one and not in the other. Excuse me, you obviously have the information because you put it in one place.
Right, they do.
Put it.
Well, it's just like when we get the stop data back for Boone County, I don't think that their stop data is, for the sheriffs is very good either. But they never have a response. All these agencies sort of, at least locally, have this realm of denial that they come in that has nothing to do with race. And even now the conversation is, how can we present this information so that we can say that it's not discrimination? And the goal is that's the wrong question. My question is, what is happening what is happening in these stops? What is happening in our system that it is so prevalent? Because of course we can say it's discrimination or bias, but what is happening in the police stop? What is happening with that the police department is not aware that their rules and procedures, which there's a huge amount of discretion there, have such a tremendous disparity. I mean, the police chief just has this temporary order as of July 2nd, which says don't stop people if it's not related to violence. So the data that you're finding is showing that either they're not listening to the chief, or there's no accountability at all for the stops that they're making, like the people in jail for the failure for the fishing licenses. Seriously, what the hell is that? What is?
There aren't a lot of them, but the two people. When you spend enough time looking back and forth through these data over and over and over, the two people picked out for the fishing license had, if I were going to characterize it, I would say they were Middle Eastern names.
Well, that doesn't, okay, Middle Eastern names, but okay, so that's a problem, but how old were they? Do they have any priors? Like, since when do we put people in jail for, okay. I mean, those are cases that they should pull, and we should ask questions like to the chief judge, like, what is this? Like, well, why is this happening? And every time we start asking those questions, we get nowhere. They've got a new team of people at MU who are supposed to be looking at their stop data, but I believe they'll have the same problem as you have, is that you have these data sets that are, I think, intentionally limited and are without the requisite information that should be there. Susan Mays has a note. I think this gives us an opportunity to define the narrative. And I think we also need to start defining the data that needs to be there, right? Simple thing like, we want you to list if your agency is HBD, well, then we want you to put, the name of your organization, right? Provide a glossary of terms. And maybe that's something that should happen at the Attorney General's level too, in terms of reporting out that data. So when they list each one, they have their acronym in that, data field as well, so that we know we can cross-reference that.
One thing I'd like to say real fast is some of the police officers that are stopping some of the blacks, they're familiar with them. And so what's happening is that a lot of the blacks are like, oh, I'm just going to just let it go. If I end up in jail, somebody may bond me out. But they're not pursuing it to file a complaint. And so that's part of the problem as well, because if you file a complaint, it ends up in the police's hand for them to determine on whether it's a complaint or not.
Well, how can they investigate themselves? How does that work?
Exactly.
So I wouldn't file a complaint if the police were going to get to investigate themselves. I mean, we just saw this whole thing happen with the chokehold, where the Citizens Police Board said, oh, Chief Jones, this is my interpretation, go back and reinvestigate yourself and see if you can determine that this is appropriate. And of course, Chief Jones came back and said, oh, everything I did was appropriate. So, you know, what we have is Citizens Police Review Board, that's not very, I don't want to use the word muscular, but they don't have any authority to hold the police accountable. They're like having to ask the police, please, will you voluntarily do the right thing? And pretty much, I would say that the police have their own version of what the right thing is. Check me, Peggy, if I'm wrong, and Chad, but it doesn't seem like we're able to get very much meaningful accountability from the Citizens Police Review Board. Chad has been on a vehicle stop committee, and you know they're studying it. But the truth of the matter is the data is, you know, replicates what you find in the same kind of disparity. So I think it's an institutional culture problem, and I also think that they're hiring the wrong people to be police officers. I don't think you can train that kind of thing out of people. That's my opinion.
Well, and you saying that, it depends on where they're hiring them from. Like if they're from the small towns that are not used to diversity, that's like the school teachers that I've told the CPS, and I know that went on to another tangent, but
they go together.
You know, but you know, they're hiring these young teachers from these small towns who probably have never even interacted with a Black kid or a Black, brown, or a kid white even that is you know, below poverty level,
or a Middle Eastern person, or an Asian person,
right?
Or
so
disabilities, it just goes on and on.
It does, and so that's part of the problem as well.
So Susan, speaking of data, can you tell us a little bit about your adventure trying to get data, and what kind of data you've had to ask for, and what that process is like? Because I don't think the average citizen recognizes like the time that we spend not only in the bail fund, but Race Matters Friends in a general way, asking for information and paying for it, because our public institution doesn't make information that's meaningful available to us so that we can make good decisions.
Sure, I'll be glad to talk about that. The bail fund last June asked the county for 3 years worth of arrest data. And we wanted basically the information that's in the 7 a.m. report, plus race and some other pieces of that information. It's February now. So it's been 7 months, 8 months. And we have gotten it's been 8 months. We paid them almost $600 back in June to get this data. We've gotten 2.5 months worth of data from them. And then they charged us another $500 to get the rest of fall 2019. Because we wanted to compare this fall's data to last fall's data to see if it was the same. So it's been $1,000 and 8 months, and we still don't have the data. And one of the things that I think is valuable about that is that if we put out in a marketing campaign that 40% of the arrests that people that go to the Boone County Jail are for failure to appear for rules violations, they have nothing to say any different. There is nothing that they can do to counter that narrative. And it makes them look stupid.
I don't think they care, quite frankly.
No, but I want the sheriff to get asked that when he goes to lunch.
Oh, I'm sorry. I really don't believe those white boys give a damn about that when they go to lunch. I think they probably fist bump each other about how wonderful they are for making sure they can make all these people go to jail, and that the sheriff doesn't answer to anybody.
You are correct, and it's probably naive of me. I have more.
But getting the information out there and having this discussion does let people in the media know, because obviously they don't have time to spend 10 months trying to dig up this information. And also we're doing a service for the public by having this conversation, because we clearly cannot have it with the agencies to whom we pay taxes for and pay their salaries, which is, equally annoying. I didn't realize that it had gone up to $500. It seems like we also need to get an attorney that will go to court and $1,000 now, go to court and demand that we get our data. That's just a violation that we need to push back on.
Well, the excuse given is, and this is something that I want to do with our 7 a.m. data when we have time, but there's a category in the 7 a.m. report called On View.
On View?
On View.
Okay.
On View means that was just something the cops saw.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to laugh.
No, you are exactly correct.
I know where this is going. This is like the shake on the floor, or the odor, or you look like you could be an escapee, or okay, I got you. Okay.
Now, the thing about that and how that relates to sunshine law is that if no actual charges go against that on view data, it's no longer public data. They have 30 days to have some kind of charge. And if they don't do it, then that data disappears from the public record. So the fact that we do have 5.5 months worth of 7 a.m. report that we downloaded and dealt with ourselves means that we have that 5.5 months of what the cops saw. So now what we need to do is connect that to charges that got filed.
Okay.
And that's something that we've got to figure out. I've got to figure out how to do that. But if those charges, what I'm assuming is that at least half of them are not going to be there.
Right, because they got dropped after the 30 days because no charge.
Yeah. And so that's also why it's taking so long, because they have to go into the court system and look up every single one of those court charges to make sure that it's still public data.
So they manage their data like they're in Fred Flintstone time. One of the things I noticed from looking at the use of force reports was they used to report handcuffing people who were not arrested, right? It was a significant number of people, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. Then they made a rule that retroactively said that they were not going to report that anymore. Mm-hmm. So there's no data, I think, for 2018, because in 2019 they changed the rule. So they're arresting, they handcuff all these people, which I believe is a use of force, and they're not charged. So, if you're doing that to 200 people a year, you're getting some, you're building building a lot of ill will with people, right? It's like that September 2nd stop that we saw that was on the internet. Like, why did they have to handcuff both of those young people? For what reason? Now, we also have a situation where the cops were shooting into the car, and that guy got away and made it to New York, right? It was a white guy. Mm-hmm. We had another situation where the white kids got in a fight downtown, and the cop's like, well, come on with me. And the kid took off running, right? And the cop had to chase him. Now, they're not answering to that either. So we have a real problem, not only with how data is collected, but just in terms of what problems the department is willing to acknowledge are real. And I think that those examples are not anomalies. I think that those things happen because it's their practice, not because, you know, today they were having a silly day and they screwed up. You know what I'm saying?
Well, that's like the mocktail cocktails that was thrown at the People's Defense, and the $5,000 charge that guy got caught with. But every time that I reach out to them in regards to it, you know, why isn't this a federal charge? Or who do I need to contact in regards to that? Because I mean, he had several more in his truck in regards to it, but he was white.
Well, just remember that no one was charged and when Beyonce Williams was run over during the protest.
Right. And now they're getting ready to do a bill
Right.
that basically gives them the right to run anybody over that's in the street. Probably on the sidewalk.
No, that we're living it, and you know what? That's on the police department's fault that happened. But there's a pattern here that very much matches what I think Jean's data shows. Is there is definitely an interest in pursuing Black residents in a way that they don't pursue white residents, and even on very minor petty things. Jean, one of my questions I had for you was, what kind of recommendations or action steps do you see going forward? What are your and what are kind of the lessons learned for you that you could impart on us about this kind of journey that you've made?
Okay, so how am I going to do this? I spent 30 years at the university doing 4 things. I taught, I did research, I dealt with my family, and I did elder care, and I did nothing else. I had 0 interaction with the rest of the universe. And so I have no idea what happens in Colombia. And part of the reason I made an intentional decision to retire is I felt like I had been in school since I was 5 years old, and it was time to find out what happened to everyone else going about their lives in like the normal world. And so I'm completely ignorant of the structures of the city or the state or much of anything else. I know how to do data. And so when Susan talked about data at one bail fund meeting, I thought, oh my God, there's something I actually know how to do that might be useful to somebody. And so I would be more than happy to work on the Freedom of Information Act data. I'd be more than happy to work on any aspect of like the calls for service kinds of data. I know how to do that, but as far as what happens next, I don't have a clue of how the city works or if it does.
And you know what, I really appreciate your response, because I think a lot of people feel that way. I think one of the biggest learning curves, and as part of being in Race Matters Friends, is how do these systems work? You know, how do I sign up to speak at City Council? How do I know what's going to be on the agenda? You know, how do I know how to read what's there and make sense of it? Who can I ask at the city if I don't understand what's on the agenda? Do I go to the mayor? Depends on the subject. The mayor has certain things that he's really on board about. This issue that we're talking about, it's not one of them. I think Brian Treese is probably the smartest mayor we've had in many, many, many years. But I don't think he's an anti-racist. And I don't say that to be judgmental, but anti-racism demands that you commit to racial justice and equity in a way that means that you disrupt the kinds of systems that we're talking about. And I don't think he's prepared to do that yet. I don't think most of our council people are prepared to do that. I don't think Dwayne Carey is willing to do that. The reason that there's a bill at the state capitol that says we want you to be able to run over people who are protesting is because we have a really sick situation going on that's been promulgating since the 60s, the Southern Strategy, and before then. So yes, and I also feel bad because I'm in this position of, you know, getting my PhD at 56 years old and understanding that people that go into the academy basically sort of give up being able to live in the world. And I really don't want to do that. I really try and want the knowledge that I get from my academic training to be used in the community. And it's very hard because it's like, well, you're supposed to be focused on research and you're supposed to be focused on publishing. But how can I give anything to my students about how to make the world better if I cannot participate in the world? So I have a lot of respect for you and Peggy for giving up all those years of service to that crazy ass thing called the academy. But we need to make some changes there too, because that knowledge that is going on in the academy needs to be put to work in the streets so that the university is the anchor of equity and not sucking our brains out for its own whatever. I can't even put a name on it. And I'm sorry to go on about it, but it's, to me, it's very painful to see women in particular give their life serving other people and not really have a chance to do what they want. So I would encourage you to keep doing what you're doing. We will show you how to navigate and cause trouble, ask questions, don't accept crumbs. We're all about it. It's actually a lot easier than you think, and you will learn very quickly. Peggy knows. One of Peggy's earliest adventures was Race Matters Friends was locked out of a media meeting with the police department. And so Peggy, I think Peggy, Carol Brown, and Tori sat outside of the meeting because they were locked out. And we got a picture in the paper of them being locked out from attending a public meeting with the media. So Peggy caught on real fast. These guys are not like, oh yeah, we want to work with you. No, it wasn't. It wasn't like that at all. It wasn't like that. We also, I noticed in your comments at council, you mentioned a little bit about Elena Cruz's articles that she had in the Tribune. And I wanted to just, you know, you were coming into this, how are you putting those things together, particularly the article about structure, you know, structural issues and the data? How are you making sense of those? Because your data doesn't really deal with that. I think that's another part of it that our society is coming to terms with.
I think the thing that really struck me in those articles was hiding behind the collection of data as an end in itself. Oh, we will collect data, which excuses us from doing anything else. And my thought was, if I can make sense of data like this to show disparities that I've illustrated in just a few months of fiddling around, you know, with it at home, the problem is pretty clear. And have I drawn everything from the data that's possible? No. But it reminded me of something someone else said in a slightly different context. If I'm watching, and I don't, a football game, and I see somebody who's hit by a player and their leg breaks in a place that there's no joint, I don't need to be a physician to know that that person needs medical attention.
Or that their leg is broken.
I don't need, and I can see that there's something terribly wrong. I can see their function is compromised, and I know they need medical intervention. And I feel like this hiding behind data, the collection of data, is something that government does at all levels. Oh, we will appoint a group and they will collect data and they will tell us what it says, and we thereby push the problem into the future and absolve ourselves of current responsibility. And in order to solve these problems, we're going to have to deal with them now with imperfect and incomplete data, but sufficient data to tell us to do something. And that was the point I wanted to drive home to them, that you know, if I can find it, it's there. And you don't need anyone else to find more.
Right. So you got a sampling of data, right? They're perfectly capable of, getting together some good samples to look at. But still, if you have a committee where no one wants to read and no one knows what variables are, and they don't understand data, you can't produce anything. And if you put certain people on the committee who have a particular ideological mindset, that's the mindset that the police want, so that they don't have to do anything, you're stuck, right? So a lot of their habits, I think, are designed to keep them from having to work too hard, to not seek out different information, because they're kind of stuck on this. You're trying to say that we're racist. No, what we're trying to say is that the way that you police is producing disparities, and it could be because you have these unconscious biases. It could be we want you to investigate the way that your professionals, so-called, are operating out in the community, and they apparently are unwilling to do that. And we see the same thing with the school district in terms of arresting students and suspending students. Same thing, right? The same kind of, attitudes of, hiding behind the data. We have the same problem with the school district. If you looked at their data, you would be shocked at the tricks that are played to keep us from getting data, basically putting it up there in PDF so you can't take it down and take it apart. Lots of ways to keep people from being able to quickly, import data, export data.
So that's where I'm willing to put in time. If somebody wants to hide data as a PDF, oh, here it is. Okay, fine. Give me the PDF and I will extract it. I will sit there because I know how to do that. And I will do it for hours until I get the data. That's not a problem.
That looks like that is going to be what we're going to have to do. The next question is, as I asked, is like, Peggy, what is the next step? What do you do with agencies who, we've been having this conversation about police stop data and disparities since 2015, and we have not moved an inch. We're just not making progress. And so I guess I'm frustrated. How do you get people who are in the power to make things better, discover that they have the political will to move us out of the age of Fred Flintstone and into the 21st century? There must be something very comforting about hanging with Barney and Fred still, is all I can imagine. The last thing I wanted to end with was talking about this idea of, the city saying that they wanted to break down institutional racism. I hear this rhetoric about that, and what I see in your data is that there are institutionalized practices that are creating those kinds of outcomes. And it looks to me like it's very, you've got different entities involved, but it seems to me they all have a similar practice, and that's producing those outcomes. Before I got on the phone tonight, I picked up these books that, we've been reading as a group for the past few years. One of them is The End of Policing by Alex Vitale. You may have read that. The other one is Suspect Citizens, What 20 Million Traffic Stops Tell Us About Policing and Race. The other one, which is awesome, which is Pulled Over, by Charles Epp and et al. He's in Kansas. And then the other one was by Jack Laser. And this one I really like. This one is Suspect Race Causes and Consequences of Racial Profiling. And Jack Laser was on campus a couple of years ago, and he's the one that really got me thinking about that the police officers have a lot of discretion, and that the only way to control their habits is to limit their discretion. So when you were talking about the rules and procedures and how, high that rate was, part of that is because their leadership gives them the discretion to do that. And Chief Jones supposedly made a temporary rule change on July 1st, limiting that discretion, and I don't think it worked. So then the question is, not for you, but our council members and other people, why are they not holding the city manager accountable for making sure that their officers are doing what they're told? And so to me, what's that?
That's a key thing I'm trying to figure out. Is the city, who is it in the city that's responsible for the practices of the police department? Is that the city manager's job?
So the police chief is hired by the city manager. The city manager reports to the city council. So Chief Jones reports to Mr. Glasscock.
Okay.
I would say that Mr. Glasscock came from the engineering world of public works, and I think that his understanding of policing is very limited. I'm just that's a fair call. I think that in our society we give a lot of deference to policing, but it's if the stop data, when it gets reported this year, they've already submitted it because it's usually due in January, continues to have the same disparities, that means that whatever the chief told them to do, they didn't do it. And that's probably what's going to happen. Now they're going to say that their software's messed up and all that other kind of stuff like that. But you did all your work in Excel, right? You don't have to have the fanciest software in the world to, figure this stuff out. So, but no. I do think that your data is telling us why we're having your data and the stop data go hand in hand, right? They go together. And it's telling me that the police officers have a lot of discretion to arrest people, charge people, and there's not any kind of equity related to it. And also Peggy says judges have a lot to do with it, and they're elected, and no one asked them up until now what they do. I consider that to be a part of structural racism, that you put judges and people in power where they can never be questioned and they can never be challenged. Probably the closest you guys get are those meetings that you have once a month with them. But the rest of the public, we have no way of getting any accountability from them or the prosecutor or anybody else. I think the system was designed that way on purpose. Jean, it's a big book to read. It might be helpful for you collecting data. It's called The Condemnation of Blackness, Race. It's called The Condemnation of Blackness, Race, and Crime and the Making of Urban America by Kahil Muhammad, who I believe is at the University of Chicago. Am I right, Peggy? Is it Chicago? So he does a fantastic job of breaking down the ways that data and policing and crime are manipulated. And it shapes the way that the community, the public responds to race and policing and crime. And so on the one end, you can say, yeah, the reason that we have these problems is because that's what the public wants, right? They want people to be stopped and they want people to be punished. And on the other end, can say that our systems have been designed to be segregationist on purpose. And so he's trying to really dismantle all of the ways that the way crime is reported, how it's put together, and the way that it marginalizes and really abuses people in the system. I don't know if I'm doing a good job of explaining it, so Peggy, help me.
Well, it's one of the best books that I've read in the past couple of years in terms of, and I keep going back to it because his whole argument, although he takes a long time to make it because he's a historian who likes to pile up a lot of it.
Well, and the history matters, right? The history matters.
But he makes the point over and over again that the data do not speak for themselves, that we have these conflicting interpretations of the same data, and the racist interpretation has won out because it does fit with the white majority's prejudice, their preconceptions. So of white superiority.
Yes, social constructions that you talked about in the beginning, right? All of these social constructions, right? About who's dangerous, who would do this and who would do that. It's like the slide you had, like, this doesn't make sense. Why, women have, more failures to peers and all that other kind of stuff. Well, the first thing I thought about was, yeah, women are taking care of kids. What are they going to do? I don't know when the data set time periods, I didn't see that, but under COVID, what are they going to do? We don't have community childcare, right? It's a huge privilege to be able to have someone to watch your kid so that you can go to court, particularly in COVID. So, speaking of which, there's a big piece in today's New York Times about how women are really sharing more of the load of the fallout from COVID in trying to manage the home and children and all that. Of course, that happens in every crisis. Anyway, I appreciate that you are working on that data and that you're willing to be, super patient about it. You will hear us often recommending books because we feel like that's one way of helping us understand historically how we got to this place. There's 3 or 4 virtual book clubs going on that we're hosting. I'm hosting one right now. The book is Too Heavy of a Load, Black Women in Defense of Themselves, 1894 to 1994 by Deborah Gray White. But we watched The Glorias to begin the talk. So we watched The Glorias, and we're going to watch another movie about the suffragettes, and we'll read some other chapters of books. But we just got done reading Mothers of Massive Resistance. And so we read about how it is and was that public education is segregated still. And so it was shocking every meeting for people in the group to realize, oh my gosh, we had no idea that all these white women were campaigning hardcore to maintain segregation. So this book this time is what the Black women were doing at the same time. So, we tend to look at time as linear, but all these things are happening at the same time. So we're trying to sort of give that air to it. I think Rose Metro's group is reading Isabella Wilkerson's new book, Cast. Are you?
I'm in that group.
You're in that group, and then
yeah, last night.
Oh, good. Peggy, what book is Tori doing?
Oh, she just did. Wasn't it My Grandmother's Hands?
Oh, okay, that's right.
I don't know if they've started a new one yet or not.
Okay. And I don't know if we have one more group or not. Peggy and I are going to tackle a big book. I think, spring, summer, it's Walter Johnson's new book. And this is really going to get us. It's called The Broken Heart of America, Lewis and the Violent History of the United States. Peggy and I are going to tackle this as a group. And Walter Johnson is from Columbia, Missouri. His dad was a professor at MU. I think he's at, I want to say he's at Columbia University now or Harvard, but he has been presented here a couple of times. He's a really fabulous historian. He has one of my first books that I read by him is called Soul by Soul Inside the Antebellum Slave Market. And he gave me some early help on my research when I was doing slave research. I'm going to be quiet for a minute and see if there's questions from Peggy Bryan, from Elena, and from anybody else that's on the online. Give you a chance to weigh in. Thank you, Ruth, for hanging in there with us. I think Peggy Bryan is another numbers egghead, if I remember correctly. You may be able to squeeze some data help out of her as well. I know her husband's been helping us as well.
Hey, I did want to, well, yeah, I want to give people a chance to pipe in. Just shoot me a chat if you're having any issues unmuting yourself, but we'll give that a couple seconds.
I appreciate all that Jean is doing because, yes, I'm a statistician too, and I appreciate that she's doing all this work. And I like all the numbers and the details and the tests and everything. So thanks for all that you're doing.
We need it.
I'm interested in following along. I've been taking notes as a journalist, but just pretty much listening right now.
It's a lot to take in. It's a lot to take in. You did a really good job, by the way, of pulling together that stuff with the police stops, and I was especially gratified that you held the police department accountable for not answering.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
And that's been something I think is very concerning, that you have a public agency that's publicly funded, and they feel like they don't have to answer. And if you work in the corporate world and you don't answer when people, you lose your job, or it's considered insubordination. And I consider it to be insubordination. If you're funded by the public and your budget is $26 million and you don't think you have to answer, in the corporate world, they'd say, we're not going to do that. So there's something definitely not quite right, that we have these kinds of disparities and no one is able to be held accountable. So I think that says something about the ideology that shapes the city and its history. I'm being very generous in how I'm naming that.
Yeah, I'd like to make a request of you, Elena, if I could. I thought you signing off your articles stating we requested this information and they opted not to get back with this. I think you should provide a status on that particular reaction from the police department on every single one of the articles that you do with them.
Well, she did both of
If
them.
it takes them 2 weeks to get back with you on something, put that in there. It's like, we requested this 2 weeks ago. Today it came back. But I mean, we need some way to measure their responsiveness. And, to a group like Race Matters Friends, they don't feel like they have anything beholden to us. But hopefully as a journalist, there's like, public record that's going out. And, at some point, if we can capture that and say, hey, this is kind of like your, response rate.
Well, I think they treat everyone that way. I mean, I think that I don't think that they take particularly in the things that are difficult for them, they don't have a sense of urgency in responding. I mean, it's the same thing with the sheriff. I mean, how is it that it can take us a year to get documentation and they have our money? That's crazy, So it's not just us. I mean, Come What for Progress has tried to get information. All these different groups have tried to get information, and they get really frustrated, or they get told one thing and it's something else. So, that's just not acceptable. It shouldn't be acceptable.
It was definitely an interesting process too.
If you want to do an article on that, we would love it.
Yeah, it's hard too because as a journalist, you think you want to quote people. That's like a big part of it. But sometimes, not answering a phone after leaving several voice messages is also making a statement as itself. So it's an interesting way to listen to non-vocalization in the same way as what people say too.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that frustrates me is, did we lose Elena? Oh no, there she is. One of the things that frustrates me is the way that silence works, right? By not saying anything, by not answering, by not providing information. It says a lot. And I think one of the ways that, I think for the Black community or brown community or any of the communities that are marginalized, silence is that they don't appear as voices, right? In the articles. They're not acknowledged. Um, and, and what incredible privilege to have a very powerful job where you carry a gun and you can take people's lives and you don't have to answer. I mean, that's just, that's pretty outrageous, right? And, you know, you don't have to take people's lives with a gun to have a detrimental effect. Same thing with the school district. You know, they don't like to, you know, give any information. But they want to be paid well and they want to pat themselves on the back. So I think there's something strange in the water here that our public institutions feel that they don't have to be accountable and that they can always keep rewriting the narrative in a way that benefits them, right? It doesn't matter who gets hurt by it. Yeah, Chad and I and our team, we've talked a lot about the need for a scorecard. Like, how well is our police department doing in being transparent? You know, how well are they doing? How do they show us that they're really working on these transparency and on these disparities? You know, what are they doing internally to demonstrate to us that they're concerned about these outcomes that they have? You know, okay, so you have these police stops. Demonstrate to us how you train your officers to respond in a stop, right? You can audit, they can audit their own rules and procedures charges and go through them with their officers. Why are you doing this? Why are we doing this? We have all this violence out there. Why are we putting people in jail for not having a doggone fishing license? That's outrageous, right? I mean, it is. It's complete knucklehead nonsense, right? And it's not making us safer. It's not making us safer either.
And there's COVID in the jail.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So I don't know. Maybe they have like really, really cold hearts and that doesn't bother them. I don't know.
Yeah, I do want to raise the kind of develop more on the idea of the scorecards, because I think this goes hand in hand with the data requests that we're having. Like, so for example, I know like the vehicle stop data, we're working on revamping the tickets. So when they write the stuff up, it's everything that the state requires of them to report, but also more discrete factors that can help us kind of isolate, you know, who it is that they're actually stopping and why, and at what point has this escalated, and so on and so forth. So there are some things that should be emerging from whatever database they use to keep this. But right now, the city and the county, they all have access to Tableau. The city has a contract with them. I know they have a license, you know, for the institution. So, I mean, really all it takes is like, you need to have like, even if you have like 5 different databases that are all controlling completely different aspects of the system, is you find that one unifying key and you link them all together in one table and you put it onto a portal or a dashboard and you make that available to the public. You make that available to internal processes. Because like, I guarantee you, if you're sitting there and you're looking at a simple like little fuel gauge indicator on your dashboard, and it's just like, you look at your disparity ratios between how you treat, say, you know, the black population versus the white population, you're going to see your needles pegged over here in the red. It's going to show you your disparities are like off chart. I mean, they're ridiculous. And it should give you things to look at so you can like start taking actions to reduce the pressure off of whatever it is you're measuring. They don't even have that. I don't even think they're aware of the problem. They don't have the desire to be aware of the problem.
They don't have the desire.
And that's part of the problem. We have to throw it up there in their face to where they can't deny it, and point to the fact that they should be developing this technology and sharing it, not us trying to go there, knock on the door and asking them for like these little piecemeal reports that they give us that they're purposely split up to try to keep everything obfuscated. I mean, that's part of the system. It's like they have, you know, oh, you have to go fill out this form before you can do this, and you have to go to like this place to get authorization for this, and we'll give you this part of the picture, but not enough to really make it useful. And you know, they hide behind things like you know, privacy, personally identifiable information, and there are so many ways around that for them to have a redacted table that still gets us what we need.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, we can get data like, let's say that, you know, for the student arrest, we should be able to know how many students each month by gender, by race. We should know that. They shouldn't be saying, over the past 10 years, we've suspended 40 kids at this one school. No, you guys need to disaggregate your data so that we can see what you're doing. They won't do that.
I feel like I should also like reiterate with my situation too. I feel like as a journalist, it's really important to say exactly what happened with trying to reach out to the police officers, just so it's, give the facts as fully as I can. So I did reach out to Jeffrey Pitts, the communications officer, and he was the one helping me communicate with Jeff Jones. But Police Chief Jones was was home because of a family emergency. But even then, when he did get home, he said he wasn't sure when he would be able to get back to me, and he wasn't sure if he'd be able to designate anybody to talk with me. And after that, then after several follow-ups, after hearing that and then not ever hearing anything in return and following up again several months later, one more time, then there was still nothing. So that's what I feel like, just so you should know exactly how the conversations unfolded over the phone after talking several times, just to make sure that it's as transparent as possible, because that's my job, to be as transparent as possible.
Oh, that's wonderful. And so here's my response to that. You know what? They can put out a press release every day that someone shot, no problem, right? So if they really wanted to clarify what their asses were doing, they could put out a press release and explain it. But the fact that they didn't put out a press release and explain it means they don't care. So, my thing is, are you guys going to do anything more than put out press releases that there were shots fired or someone got shot? Because they could use Tony Messina and Brad Pitts, and they have some other communication person to really actually do public relations and outreach, which they get paid to do. They could do that. But that would take effort, right? That would actually take, having conversations, maybe some difficult ones that are needed about what's going on. But instead, they're going to do a video release somewhere 3 months down the line.
Right? This is where I'm convinced those dashboards that's gonna remove their ability to weasel out, because it's gonna shrink their ability to hide in the shadows.
Well, because they don't want to answer any questions. They
Right.
just have a one-way conversation. So they don't want to be in a position where you can ask them something and they're like, I don't know if I have a good shiny answer for you. And actually, I would be okay with that.
Yeah. I guess, my advice, like this is across the city, on every institution we're talking about, organization, we're going to have to push for this kind of data transparency. I mean, it's failing across the board, and that's where a lot of the failures are just getting thrown us right into the confusion, which is where they like to operate, because they're not held accountable, and frankly, it's a nightmare for the victims. Which, in the case of CPS, they're all minors and most of them young children. But I would like to look, for example, at the police department, and really kind of go through their records and be like, this is I brought this up to Chief Jones and to the council a couple of years ago when Burton was still there, talking about their annual performance reports, for example, weren't tied to any marks or performance, or it was just very generic, promote self-education. Yeah, we'll give a good score on that one. Promote them on to whatever. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of ridiculous that you didn't have a customized, analysis for a police department which functions wildly differently than the rest of the city. So I think they started going back and redefining some of those roles, but that needs to be tied to policy, and it needs to be tied to how they measure. So if they don't have number of stops divided by, number of Black individuals stopped or whatever else, whatever indicator it is that comes out that kind of shows the disparities in treatment, if they don't have that tied to their performance reports, then they're never going to make any corrections. Because if it's not going to get, brought up against them, the culture obviously tolerates it, and no one's going to enforce it. So, I mean,
I'm always going to love transparency.
Oh, no. I agree.
Yeah.
I always
know exactly. I think communication is always the best way, but that's, my entire job. So.
Right. No, this is why I was pushing for an audit, because I feel we're at the point where we need a state auditor to come through here and basically look at our departments and be like, this is garbage for the modernization for our communications in our city is so antiquated. And I think it's kept that way on purpose, like I said, to kind of keep it, controllable.
So I'll give you an example of antiquated, and this is for Jean, who's going to be learning how all these systems work. So the Citizens Police Review Board, up until about a year ago, didn't even take minutes. One of our Race Matters Friends members actually went to the meetings, and she took minutes for us because the city staff person who took minutes wrote one sentence. And so we actually went to a meeting and we kept pressing them about this, because they also don't audio record their meetings. They also don't video record their meetings, for some reason from a long time ago that they've decided that they can't do that. So we went to this meeting and we were asking the board, you should provide minutes. We wrote a letter to the city manager and said, well, maybe you should audio record the meeting and then get them transcribed, use Zoom. And he said, no, he was right. He said, something could be missed in Zoom, we'll get a transcriptionist. So now they have a court transcriptionist who transcribes, but that they throw away the audio. So if you can't read that text, you can't hear it, right? Because apparently they don't think the audio is worth saving. So if the transcriptionist screws it up, we're shit out of luck because they don't keep the audio. Now, do I think they keep the audio? Yeah, I do. But for some reason, they don't want to, right? So that's weird. I just
see. I think these are basic requests that we can make when we look at the primary functions of what influences like the whole school to prison pipeline function in Colombia. Once we identify these key committees that that we need to actually have functional and transparent, that we can go with a blanket request and be like, provide assets to record, to transcribe, to make this accessible above and beyond your typical work committees and that kind of stuff. Because there are some that are very central to like a lot of the themes that we're talking about here. Budget is a huge one. I mean, that should be recorded. The discussions they're having should be recorded and documented. They should be transcribed so you can search them. This should not be a mystery, and it shouldn't be beholden for us to show up to every single meeting in person in order to figure out what's going on.
I'll give you just two more examples. Number one, the school district doesn't provide minutes for their meetings. And number two, we have a community and housing development commission. They gave away 3 rounds of money from COVID CARES money. And they had a very interesting meeting on December 16th, which tells you how disconnected our commission members are from reality. One of the commission members didn't know that food scarcity was an issue for people in Colombia. More significantly, they're not aware that there is a Black community that needs help and is being left behind, which is even more shocking. But of that meeting, there's no audio and there's no video, and they produce minutes, but guess what? They also produce a transcript of the meeting, but you have to ask for it, and they don't put those things online. So there's a big difference between looking at the transcript and the minutes, right? So without that transcript, we would not understand the thinking mechanisms behind the way that they give out money or how they appropriate money to the various groups. But fortunately, the commissioners, because they're not on TV and they're not audio taped, let us know that I just like to pick these 2 big groups because these are the ones that I see and I'm the most comfortable with, and I'm not comfortable with these other small groups. So we're just not going to do that. That's what happened. So was that covered in our papers? No. Why? Because it's not televised. There's no audio tape. And there's many, many problems, including, the meta narrative of all the corporations buying the newspapers, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, my point is that data that Jean is talking about with the disparities is the same disparity that we have in housing and the same disparity we have in public education. And you know what I'm saying? And all of these folks collude to do as little as damn possible. And which apparently it's just easy for them to say, I'm just not going to answer. I'm just not going to do anything. And I think that the housing and community development people, they might try to do something, but it's not an issue of the mayor made some comment of there being Black nonprofits and white nonprofits. That's not it. The people that we put on boards and commissions need to have a connection to the people that they're serving, right? It's certainly helpful that they do have one Black person on that commission who kept them on their toes. But I don't think a lot of attention is paid to who we put in those places. Just like if you look at the police department, I mean, I think that there's 7, 8 Black officers for the whole department. Someone's not paying attention. There's no people of color in their command staff, right? So there's something about the way that we don't expect much from people in town. I don't know if it's mediocrity or amateurism or whatever word you want to give it. But anyway, no, Jean, your data sets, your data samples are illustrate the culture that's here, that sort of white paternalism or whatever you want to call it. It's pervasive and it's accepted.
Yeah.
And it's very hard to, dismantle it. For example, if the city manager's like, oh, it's okay, you don't have to answer to the press, then what? What do we do? What do you do when the superintendent of the schools bullies the press and says, I'm not going to talk to you? What do we do? I mean, I'm not trying to do a takeover like they did on January 6th, but I understand that people are frustrated. And so it's like, how do we have reasonable conversations with adults to get information? Yes, Chad,
If I'm following your logic correctly, the answer is we give them an award for inclusion and diversity.
That they don't deserve, that they didn't earn. Got it. All right. Well,
Yeah, in stark contrast to the lawsuits and state level legislative like insight going into CPS and their practices. They're really.
So Jean, I really appreciate your meeting with us tonight, and thank you for sharing your slides. I don't know if we're allowed to put them on our Facebook page and or at our website and share them.
This isn't mine.
I
I did the analysis. The data are public, and I don't need to give you permission to use public data.
Well,
and whatever I did made it easier to follow, then please do whatever it is that seems most useful with it. No, absolutely.
I'm going to be talking to you because I'm learning how to use this R software. And so I want to see how I can take your data and make data sets, right? And
you can do with R, and I don't know R. We don't need to relitigate that one, but it would be really cool if we could take the data that I've got that have the addresses and the charges,
yes,
and do a heat map.
okay.
Because when I went through I went through some of those addresses over and over and over and over again. Certain streets, oh my gosh, I got to know where those streets were real quick. Wow. Because they just kept coming up again and again and again. And if you could do a heat map with that in R, I think that would be a really powerful, intuitive way for people to look at that kind of information.
So what you see is over policing. So to me, that's over policing. But the other part of it, as I think, is under policing. And so how do you show that part?
Well,
it's the negative.
I'm not sure about under policing.
I think under policing and over policing happen simultaneously.
I think we could probably cut the force in half and, just go about policing.
Just so we know, just because I've looked into it a couple of different times, but the 7 a.m. report gives addresses, but not zip codes. So you can't get longitude and latitude.
But I have the zip codes. I went and looked up every single one.
Yep. And that's what I'm going to use that data to build a heat map in Tableau.
But what about the stop data? Because the stop data has the GIS location.
There's also the county's 911 dispatch.
That's right.
They have something, but it is not latitude and longitude. It is a different piece that I have not figured out yet. But it is one of those things that Jean doing this manual labor to pull this up is going to enable us to do it, which it's adding another column from their query. This is not rocket science. Mm-hmm. And I'll be happy to write it for them if they have a problem with it. They just need to give me their table structure. But in order to get that GIS data that is good, it's going to cost some money. So I've been looking into some options, but building, because the calls for the ones that have been to get that data translated was going to cost like a couple $100, and I didn't want to do that without talking to everybody first, just to see how many calls and where they go.
So is it not something that we could use R to code and pull in?
I'm not sure. I don't know what the latitude and longitude options are. I'm looking at it from a database angle, and that's different than R. So I don't know if R allows, we'll put in latitude and longitude.
So you'd have to set up a data set where, well, we'd have to set up a data set where we'd have to ask R to set up an object and the data set, we call that out of there. So,
and I haven't found anywhere that you can get that free in the thousands of addresses situation. I've found several places that'll give you 100 a day, but we have 5,000 in our list. And, you know, I'm not going to remember to call 100 a day for however long that's going to take. But, you know, there's places you can get more than that, but they charge. So
Susan, I sent Jean a link to doing police stops in R.
I'm not going to learn R right now.
You don't, I'm not talking about you learning R, but I do think it's interesting to see how they set up their data. So part of it was that geographic stuff. So okay. I'm learning how to do R. It's going to kill me, but I suspect that, I mean, I'm just curious. It's crazy to me that as a public, as citizens, that we, you know, you basically have to go get another kind of degree so that you can figure out how to do this stuff, because the people who are paid to do it aren't doing it. And I think part of the reason they aren't doing it is because they don't have the capacity. I really believe that.
No, I think that they don't care.
Well, that too. I mean, I think that goes along with it, but I also don't think that, you know, I don't think there's a lot of, they don't have a lot of capacity in the police department to do this kind of data analysis. I just don't think that is there.
No, this is what city council should have appointed staff that could actually do this. I mean,
there's nobody on staff that
needed to do.
Well, they could hire people.
Yeah,
they can hire people that have these kind of.
We don't have any money except for cops. That's the only money we have.
You know what they have is they could put it as an internship opportunity for MU computer science students, information IT students. They can go do a 12-week internship in the summer, because if that's what those kids are majoring in, they know how to do this, or they can figure it out.
Well, I'm actually
oversee them. They need someone to oversee them, and somebody who understands what. And so if they don't have somebody who can actually meaningfully mentor to them, and they're not helping them. Right?
Well, there's the data analytics. They have a data analytics master's degree program, and there's a way to line that up with the public administration degree. So there are grad students that would do this in a heartbeat, but I'm an actual database programmer. And so that is my day job, but I don't have access to their data.
Right.
So I can't pull that. So I have to go and pull the CSV and manipulate that. So,
but more importantly, she can't do that, but they can. They have access to their own systems, and they can go through and they can redact the things that are sensitive information and still come up with, like, say, a master spreadsheet or a master table that we can pull whatever data. And I mean, they should have their own presets, their own data indicators. But if we have a big old table full of like 75 unique variables, that's kind of what we want.
So yeah, no, there's some really cool stuff going on, and R is on my list, but it's going to be a couple of years. But
conversation briefly as well. But instead of, like, you know, R being the issue, if we have like just the tabular data, would Tableau public work?
You still have to import the data in. You know, I mean, part of me thinks we should pester the school district and say, you need to stop putting all your data in those PDFs, and so and your data available in CSV, or, you know, limit it so that we can tabulate it ourselves. We shouldn't have to do that. I mean, they're paying somebody. They're basically paying someone to make sure that we can't get information. Just as an FYI, Gene, at the school district, their data tableau says everything is about Black or all. Those are the categories. So they're either Black or all. That's what's on their tableau. Those are the demographic categories. When I said that they were really into Barney Rubble and Fred Flintstone, that's a perfect example of the kind of stuff that they get away with. And we couldn't get the papers to go after them to say, that's really not appropriate. And superintendent argued that that's appropriate for them to refer to every single category demographic at their schools as Black or all. Oh, Chad's going to pull it up.
Oh yeah, because this is one of my pet peeves.
No one believes this when we tell them this, but yeah, there you go.
But not only are these terrible, I mean, they're kind of blurring the years together. Like it used to be like they had them, kind of split out, but everything's grayed out. So what you're not seeing is like, for example, here's this 40.2%, but the actual goal isn't, you can see the 20% here, right?
Right.
So you can see the goal, but that should be a milestone external to this table so you can do a quick comparison of where you are in relation to your goal.
Right.
Just makes sense. And that information is not included. It's not consistent. And it's like just the fact that they're doing like little tricks, like just trying to grayscale all this stuff out to show that it's not all bleeding red. Like it's like this every year. And they're going to go back and say, oh, well, this was just a pandemic year. No, their entire time, if you look back here at some of these figures, if the goal is 75%, you're red on all these. I mean, you're going to run out of red toner trying to print off one of these reports.
So I
can't believe that we have organizations falling over themselves to prop up Stiepelman as like, what a great superintendent when these are the kind of indicators that we're looking at. This is ridiculous. And like I said, this is like what they've manipulated and it's already seedy, but
yeah.
But if I go to download this stuff, let me move my
over here on the bottom, Chad.
This little download icon right here. So yeah, they have disabled. They have had to go through and disable
every single one of them.
The data, the crosstab, and the Tableau workbook, so that you can only export the stuff as an image, have it flattened out, and put the burden of effort on people to go through and actually break this stuff down.
Just to make you madder.
Yeah.
Theoretically, in Tableau, you should be able to right-click on any one of those cells and download that data.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's blocked because they have it all flattened out to an image file.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, to me, it's ridiculous because, I mean, they could have, again, one master spreadsheet in the background. They could populate all these tables, but there's no reason why we shouldn't have our own access to develop our own indicators.
So why do they have, third grade, reading third grade Black, kindergarten literacy Black? What is that? I mean,
you're looking at the free and reduced lunches. You're also looking at Black, but these two numbers are going to be like overlapping, I'm assuming. But there's no distinction. The way this just dumped into a table like this, there's nothing showing what the relations are. I mean, it's just, this is a, but here's the thing.
Sorry, I got to ask. So we really are, they're just separating out Black kids from the rest of the population. That's what this.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, that's it. There's Black or some other group.
Yep.
Well, free and reduced lunch is what what they use because they're not allowed to use race when they're redistricting.
Right, but why are they saying this? Math Black. What is this?
It's bullshit, is what it is.
Is this reference? Is this like a racial category that they're listing here?
Well, in this case, they are looking at the achievement gap.
So, but then
what? Wow.
What is student satisfaction though? Look, look at student satisfaction, OSS, all, and then Black. I mean, that's not what is that about?
Yeah, this stuff right here, this is all the out of school suspension data.
I've never seen data like this for a school system in my entire life. I am like.
So why do they think this is okay?
Yeah, somebody tell me why this is okay, because this is like.
And why haven't they been?
Mm-hmm.
Have they been called? Have they been called to the carpet on it?
Peggy contacted Peter Stiepelman, and he was insistent.
Well, he's inclusive, so
Yeah.
Peggy contacted him, and I think it was Tracy Griever Rice that just took all this stuff apart big time. There's another sheet, Chad, that big mountain piece, remember, that also has all these measurements that don't add up and all this kind of thing. So, you know, the board.
But hey, this would be a way for them to get more money filtered in. You know, if they can designate that they have this many issues with the Black people.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So this is, you know, this is one of our major challenges is that
what the hell? I need to go on. I'm going back on mute.
No, I mean, no, this is perfectly fine. This is a conversation we need to be having.
When I saw this the first time, I was just losing my mind. It's like me reading that December 16th transcript. You know, I had to put it away because I started getting bent out of shape. But I mean, they have not been able to give us an explanation for any of this. They don't want to. Chad, I'm going to look for, I'm looking for the document that Tracy did for us.
I
data.
have no clue.
I'm trying to see if I can make it come up.
Yeah, if you have it open, just share your screen.
I'm trying to get it.
I ended mine. But yeah, CPS, I mean, they're very disingenuous, which is very disappointing because like my thing is like, I really don't have a lot of tolerance for corruption or for, well, I really shouldn't say incompetence because I mean, I'd be kind of passion harsh judging on myself half the time. But you know, if you're in that role, in that position to perform a function, it's like you have to live up to that professional expectation. And when you're given stewardship over our children, and I mean, this is like a state mandate that, you know, that you be taking your children to these institutions, that they should be having responsible oversight and responsibility.
Okay, so
it's not.
So the call that I'm on every other week with CPS,
open it.
How can I bring this up without, you know, naming names or, you know, I'm just baffled.
Well, we've already brought it up to them. And I think one of the challenges is that several people have asked Helen Wade to appoint an equity committee and also a special education parent committee, and they won't do it. Helen Wade will not do it. So this is one of their charts, and this is Tracy Griever Rice put this, you know, responded to this, and I just put it in the Google Doc. But the analytical and data presentation problems, the categories are a hot mess.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they're not mutually exclusive categories, and other times what is included in the category is not apparent, as Chad just showed us. Having all as a category at the bottom of the graphic table is misleading. Many, particularly casual viewers, will assume that all is synonymous with total, when clearly it is not. Population categories described are not only not mutually exclusive and fully explained, they're not comparable to each other. Thus, they should not have been presented as a comparative chart, graphic bar chart. Not cool to compare people to themselves without being able to distinguish who has which characteristic or combination of characteristics. So essentially, these graphs imply that being Black is logically comparable to qualifying for an IEP as an indicator of learning difference, or being poor, free and reduced lunch guidelines. So this is what our public education institution is doing.
You guys have to stop showing me this stuff. My head is exploding.
Presentation of percentages.
Harness that, and we can talk because we certainly need more activity in the CPS arena. And if you want to take up this cause and run with it, I'd be more than happy to.
Yeah, I'm happy to play in this arena. I got lots of experience.
I'm jotting it down as official now.
This should be a question for all the school board candidates.
So Ruth, if you click on the link in the chat, you can download this. It's in our Google Drive.
Okay.
I love this.
You want me not to sleep ever again, right?
This is one of my favorite ones. Presentations of percentages should, what does it say? Should never, what did I do here? Is this me?
No, I don't know. I just clicked on the chat link. Was that me? I don't know what I'm doing over here.
What happened? I was trying to share screen. What happened, Chad? Is that Chad? Are you sharing?
Yeah, I'm already sharing the screen. Do you want me to-
Oh yeah, presentation of percentages should always go to 100%. Otherwise, the data is being misrepresented to imply a greater degree of change than actually happened.
Right?
It's not cool to report either ratios, percentages, rates, etc., without reporting at a minimum the total population count. Nor is it cool to report raw values without providing both the N equals and typically some proportional reference, i.e., percentages, rates, etc. For example, because they're not mutually exclusive categories, we can't tell shit about OSS and behavior incidents without doing math in our heads.
Yeah, not to mention they haven't even cleaned the data because you probably have like multiple infractions for the same either administrator, the same teacher, the same student. None of that is conditioned.
Yeah. And the AP dual credit and ACT scores just freaking slay me with that in that you're all shitting me kind of way. Where's my black IEP FR lunch breakouts now?
Right.
So anyway, the framing of black in the context of other identified groups just so implicitly racist. So, I mean, you could just go on and on and on. They're just not trying at all.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the thing that got me, Ruth. Go back to that, Chad, that graph right there. So you have black. Does that mean that there's no other demographics?
That's what I'm saying. What there's no other category, right? You're either black or you're not.
Right.
And my mouth is still open.
So I don't know how to get this link, you guys. But I mean, I probably won't sleep for the next year if you actually get it to me and I read it.
I'll email it to you.
Yeah, we'll include this in the link, but this is cpsk12.org.
This is on their website?
Yeah, this is their scorecard.
What?
Yeah.
Legit? This isn't like a joke, right? I mean, you guys aren't just teasing me.
No, we are not teasing you. This is like, do you see the balding? Seriously? I mean, it was thinning earlier, but I mean, honestly, I've aged 10 years over the last 2 just from CPS.
I mean, I can go on the Columbia Public Schools website and read this, see this.
Yes.
You won't see this other text that's in there that Tracy Griever Rice wrote, but if you go to the first page of that document.
Okay. Well, I didn't expect the commentary to be included, but the data.
So Chad is taking you to it. Look at they gave that asshole a diversity.
Oh my God.
I know, I saw that.
And I was in the room, and I think I was probably the only one that didn't clap. I was just
so ridiculous.
No, I'm sorry, but Brian has earned years of shame over this move.
It wasn't his choice. He didn't pick him.
He could have like just refused, and he should have on principle.
Oh, that wouldn't be Brian's style. He wouldn't do that.
But yeah, what we're looking at is the district scorecard, just on the quick link.
All right.
Go there, Chad. Yeah.
And then just check across the top for your different tabs. So, for example, your
goals.
I think the comparison districts.
Okay.
It's not terrible for like a lot of things, but I mean, you really have to watch it because like it's really kind of shoddily put together. But
okay.
Yeah.
All right, I'll check it out.
So Chad, show her where's that big mountain, that big tree, whatever that document. Where is that is it on the scorecard?
Which document?
The document that Tracy tackled. Where is that on the
I thought it was one of these three, one of these screens. No.
Maybe it's in the introduction one.
And they may have taken it down because like I haven't seen it in this recently, but I haven't been specifically looking for it either.
And so where they have like the free and reduced lunch stuff, I had to tell them that with all the families that have lost their jobs, you have more people that normally are not on free and reduced lunch on free and reduced lunch, and then you're allowing them to get the hot spots first.
Yeah.
Because they have more access to the internet.
Here it is.
And so they're like, oh yeah.
Ruth, here it is. Look at
okay, got it. Yeah.
You see? Black Black.
I don't know. I'm putting my glasses back on. I don't know if I really want to. But
Oh, we lost Jean. She got tired of us. Well,
oh my gosh.
Yeah, but I mean, even looking at the goals here, are these even on par for what we want out of any kind of data tracking system? Is this what we want out of the public education system?
Yeah.
Some are kind of very basic, but this is also
Oh, I thought you had something. I thought I seen something about dropout. Was there something about that?
So so look at this, Ruth. The math goes to 80%. The graduation rate goes to 90%. These don't even go to 100%.
Mm-hmm.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. Behavior, free and reduced lunch, that's over here,
Right. And this goes back earlier, your ACT scores. How come those aren't broken down by the same graphics as everybody else? If you're going to have the distinction of your special ed, your IEP, your Black, people of color, Indigenous. I mean, you could break out those as you want, but none of this apply to the ACT scores.
So when you're looking at things like math, it's only Black people. Behavior, it's only Black people. Graduation, it's only
This is what I'm saying. This is really. I mean,
I am appalled. I'm appalled.
Well,
they think they're doing such a great job with this. I mean, this is the kind of, this totally is exactly right up there with the way that our police data and all the other data that we complain about are. It's outrageous. It really is.
Tracy, those Black teachers and educators, just are they okay with this? Because they don't like to step on any toes. But are they okay with this?
I don't think they are, but they want.
I bet you they don't know about it, or they're not going to speak up about it.
Oh no, I no, I don't think they know about it. And if they do know about it, they're I don't know.
Yeah,
it's a tough job.
Oh my gosh, I'm just sick by this.
Oh. No, it's really horrible. They gave him a Superintendent of the Year award and a Diversity Award for this. And that's
right.
That's because
I was in the room when they did it.
Yeah, well, that award is wiping his butt with, and that's about it.
Right. Well, the Black fraternity that they use, I know that they're spectacular supposedly, but I don't see them out in the community, and I'm out in the community all the time.
The Black fraternity, which one are you talking about?
Omega. I think it was Omega.
Yeah. Well, one thing about our system that's really interesting is the ways that the power structure learns to use and exploit people to maintain their power, and so that doesn't,
right.
They're very good at it. They're very good at keeping the game going so they can stay in power and do as little as possible, and if people think that they're special, they want to get acknowledged.
Could you scroll back to where it says parents' needs met? I want to see what that percentage is.
Oh yeah. Not it took a hit this year.
85%.
Well, that was 2019, 2020. That was not.
Okay.
Well,
I can't even say that 73% is.
They're probably not reporting that stuff.
Oh wow.
Yeah, especially for the last year. Yeah. And the questions that they asked are hokey too.
But here's something that just floors me. Like, for example, we look back, we have 339 cases of out-of-school suspensions. How long have we been in school?
We're just for the whole year.
Right? I mean, that was the 2019-2020 school year. So that the last 6 months.
What are those asterisks? What do those stand for? What does that say? Count of African American students with one or more out of school suspensions. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know what the asterisks are because it doesn't let me. All right, it does let me click to it. That's good.
I'm gonna have to go charge up my laptop just so I can click on this mess.
Right.
Not gonna
I guess
get
it's
it.
not hyperlink. I'm not sure what those are.
You can't get any data. They have everything. They have everything blocked.
Mhm.
They have everything blocked.
If they got black where I can see it when I go onto their site, that's enough of a problem for me.
Yeah, this is their website that we're looking at. We're on.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. I know. That's what I'm talking about. If I can go on there and see that, that's a problem.
But they think that this is okay.
Right.
And this was kind of the appeal of, like, looking at stuff like Tableau, because I mean we could have, well, hopefully better spreadsheets, but we could do like one of these each for CPS, for CPD, for like the imprisonment rates. There's a ton of other things in there that we could use. And if you actually enable the data, you can come up with some really kind of cool, just ability to kind of click through all these links and piece together like what it is that you're looking for, and actually present it in a way that makes sense. Clearly, they're not even doing that. This is just a basic like spreadsheet entry that has like, there's no visual hierarchy that has anything to do with like arranging these numbers. It's just
So
shoddy.
I wonder if these are full black kids or are they mixed, but mixed with something. But
that's the whole.
How did they?
That's the whole point, Erica. Is they're not breaking it. It's on purpose.
No, this is like who thinks this? I'm serious.
Ruth can't believe it. Ruth can't believe it. I'm telling you, Ruth, we have been dealing with serious.
Carla London decided on this was.
Oh, I'm sure she did with her incompetent self. Yeah.
Boy, I better never meet any of these people face to face.
They're incompetent. There's no other way to put it. They're incompetent, and they are actually rewarded for their incompetence.
I am probably
really, the school board is kind of
tonight.
The school board's kind of like circling the wagons too. I think if you look at Chris Horn and David Seaman, they're both new enough. I think David's probably a strong enough leader that he can probably resist most of that pull. But the rest of the board is just kind of circle wagons at this point in time, and it's just they're trying to field the criticism from the public, and a lot of that comes from like a lot of the in-seat parents groups. People are like really highly charged about that and probably just draining them, and I do get that for the time being. But,
well, and I have reservations about them, because when I do speak out about that, they're like, well, you have 2 new black people on the thing, and I'm just like, but if they're not coming from behind those desks,
yeah,
and going out into the public or into the streets or where the need is, they're no better than the people that are sitting there now.
And honestly, the person who said that to you, I mean, it just shows like in their mind it's a check box, it's tokenism to them.
Right. Oh, like David Tyson Smith, but that's another story. So,
right.
I think one of the things about the NC parents, which I think is instructive for all of us, is that I don't think that they realized how dysfunctional the school district was until COVID hit. And
yes,
it's really mind-opening for a lot of them. And I'm actually very pleased to see how much learning they are willing to do and have been doing to understand, oh, this is what equity is about. Oh, these are all the kids that are getting left behind. And they're not comfortable with it. So they're going through, they're figuring out, hey, our elected officials, their asses haven't been working for us. And they don't like it. And so they're having to learn how to use the system, right? They're learning what does it mean to be a citizen, to have to make change. And I think that's a good thing. Now, we're not going to agree with them on everything. And a lot of, there's a good number of people on there that do know about equity, right? And they'll ask, what does this mean? And because they want to know. So I think as a Black woman, I do get very exhausted from trying to explain to white people, this is what you need to know. But in that particular group, I felt it was important for us to do that because there is so much wreckage that happened to this because of the school district. So much wreckage that didn't need to happen if they had the slightest bit of a good leader. And they, it didn't happen. I mean, Peter's still there. I hope he takes all of his administrative team with him. But it's definitely was heartbreaking to me to see how the school board was completely incapable of bringing people together, completely incapable of making space and making room for people's ideas and suggestions, completely unwilling to put a parent committees together to help them do a better job of making decisions, completely incapable of handling the crisis. That's what they just don't have.
Right. And honestly, I just, a lot of this data, I think honestly, it's like just one of the prongs of going forward with the strategy. But yeah, if you can't even detect the issue, like if they functionally don't have the indicators to show us going wrong, there's no way that they can be seen as responsible stewards over our children. That was the entire thing that got them in trouble with the catapult. They were basically outsourcing our children to behavioral therapists that were abusing them. The facilities were out of code. There were so many issues with that whole process. But again, that was just kind of what they agreed to. So,
All right, I think we've wore everybody out.
I'm worn out. I'm kind of rambling. So I apologize for that, but yeah. And
I'm gonna need to take some melatonin tonight or something.
Right? We got Ruth is beside herself. She didn't know what to do.
I'm gonna walk up over to Tracy's house, and she and I are gonna sit out on her deck in the cold.
Ruth's gonna say, tell me this again. What?
so Erica and Peg, am I adding you both to CPS now? I mean, we have CPS and CPD and bail fund are the three big ones we're trying to run.
We need a CPS data team.
CPS and CPD is hurting for volunteers.
Yeah, we need a data team.
Do you mean what do you mean?
For things like just keeping tabs on data.
I'm fine with that.
Latest incidents are okay.
Mm-hmm. I mean, especially since I'm on a call with them every other week.
Right.
So I don't know who else is on that call, but yeah.
It just helps to have people that can keep tabs on what's going on and bring things to our attention, and vice versa. If there's something going on that we need to get behind and mobilize, maybe have like a community-wide call. We can do that as a group.
Right. So, no, I'm fine with that. I'm fine with either one, to be honest.
Okay.
Okay, you guys.
I mean, I have a feeling I'm gonna be blocked one day, but yeah.
Thank you guys for participating with us tonight. We're really
thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, Susan, for telling us about that work that you're doing there, and thank you, Ruth. I'm glad you get to see these things kind of up close. It's a lot of moving parts, and it's a lot of work. Unfortunately, crap ton.
All right. Well, good night.
Thank you.
Good night. Thank you all.
We'll talk again soon. I'm waving at you. You can't see me. Bye.
Good night.
And just in the brief seconds, anybody out there in the public who's been listening to this, yes, we need volunteers. Contact us.
Good night.